what then has to change?
What has to change is public opinion on these issues, to make them to realise, A, the number of accidents. People have no idea that we've had bombers going out to bomb Russia, thinking from a computer failure that Russia had attacked the United States. We've had that already. We've had the situation when in Cuba, when the third officer of a Soviet submarine was the only one to tell the captain and the second officer, no, they mustn't fire nuclear weapons. He had a key, he could stop them. He said, no, don't do that. We may be starting World War III. So the accident issue. But I think at the moment, the best way to move public opinion in our sort of country is the cost issue. Because everywhere we go, whether it's public libraries or it's accident and emergency wards or it's housing programs or whatever, cuts, cuts, cuts is the word, isn't it? Always cuts. But nobody's making a connection with the enormous sum of money we're going to spend on nuclear weapons. I think public opinion, who's going to move the public opinion? Well, the people who've so far been silent, and I'm talking about the Oxfams, the Christian Aids, the CAFODs, all these big development agencies talk about poverty all the time, but they don't link poverty to the 1.7 trillion US dollars a year we spend on war and weapons. And that connection's got to be made. And they've got to help to make it, because they've got supporters, millions of supporters, and they've got to make that connection. So I'm not unoptimistic. I'm always optimistic. And I think people are beginning to understand. And I do think that what I call Blair's wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya and all this, I think has brought a kind of distrust now of war as the solution to problems. People are not nearly as gung-ho as they were. We're British. And in fact, I think the vote on Syria, you know, there was a vote in Parliament, I think that owed a lot to the big demonstration in 2003 against the Iraq war, because politicians didn't expect then 1.5 million people coming out, or 2 million people, to oppose that war. And by the time the Syrian thing had come along, I think they were aware public opinion was not with them. So things change. Public opinion is always changing. Our job is to make it change in the right direction.
Having been a change maker, a change seeker all your life, how you think change happens?
Well, the first thing with change happening is to look through history and see how it's changed. It's not some revolutionary idea that public opinion moves. The fact is that that public opinion does change, and we've watched various situations in which change has worked. I mean, the fact that we don't sell slaves anymore was the result of a very clever campaign thought out by Wilberforce and all his friends. The fact that I've got an old age pension is due to a 10-year campaign, 98 to 08, that Lloyd George suddenly built on. But they campaigned. The people in 1898 said old age pensioners, the men go to this workhouse and the women go to that workhouse, and that's God's plan. 10 years later, they'd changed their minds. People had worked on it, and they got the Archbishops of Canterbury and Westminster, God knows, on board. The simple things like smoking. You're sitting here today, I don't know whether you smoke or not, but you haven't pulled out any fags, and I wouldn't let you. But 40 years ago, it would be extremely rude if I tried to stop you smoking. People's attitude to smoking, health matters, cost matters, sociability, all these things have changed opinion about smoking. And the same can be with war. We don't normally, these days, kill our neighbours if they offend us because of some parking problem. Be abnormal. But there were times in history when you wouldn't leave your front door in London without a servant and a torch and a sword. That was the way of doing things. We've changed the culture, and I think we can change the culture, but it won't come by some miraculous clap your hand, it's going to happen. We've got to bring in, step by step, the different processes that make, in war terms, non-violent solutions normal. And I think we're beginning. I mean, the fact that we've got today an International Court of Justice depends very much on a completely forgotten man. He's up in Hampstead, in a graveyard, Randall Kramer, the first Nobel Peace Prize winner. Nobody's ever heard of him. But he talked about arbitration in courts, And finally, after the First World War, we developed the League of Nations Court. We have, what else have we got? International Criminal Court. I mean, the idea that anybody can be hauled up to an international criminal court is a miracle. They wouldn't have believed it in 1850, but now it actually exists. It's inadequate because it can't take into its tribunals politicians who started illegal wars, unfortunately. But it's beginning and it's developing. So all these are the steps. At least now there is some moral awareness that selling weapons to other countries is a moral issue. Their campaign against the arms trade has been incredibly successful. And there's major companies now are very nervous, even though selling weapons is a major British institution. We're about the fifth biggest arms sellers in the world. But people are aware that you can't go down to home base and buy a machine gun. Well, why should I be able to go and buy a machine gun and send it off to Congo, which is what we can do at the moment? So it's a step-by-step process of changing opinion. And sometimes I think it changes in the wrong direction. I do. Sometimes I think we turn out to be less human rather than more human. I think we're so obsessed now with electronic communications that sometimes we forget that we're people with influence ourselves to do things. We're absorbing information all the time. But I wonder the long term where that's going to lead. It's become a kind of religion, isn't it, to be able to communicate. It's very positive too, because now you can talk to fellow activists all around the world, and that's very powerful, and you can organize campaigns. So that's on the plus side. But I think also on the minus side, it makes people more passive than they ought to be. People are capable of doing anything if they get on with it. I go to meetings sometimes and I say, at the end of quite an inflammatory talk, I say, now, how many of you here, 30, 40 people, have written a letter to the local paper in the last 6 months? How many on any moral or social issue? Ooh, one hand goes up. One hand goes up. At the most, one hand. Or how many of you phoned into the BBC to say, why didn't you say that? One hand. People, they like going to meetings, perhaps, and hearing people, but actually doing something, that's quite a big step forward. And I think we have to be doing something.